So as of the time of posting this video, Wakanda Forever, Black Panther 2 will be out globally this coming weekend in theaters. So I think Wakanda Forever will be one of the most diverse and have the most diversity when it comes to what people actually think about this movie. So if you're new around here, make sure to subscribe to never miss hitting the Marvel, DC, pop culture based content that we try to deliver on a daily basis. If you could, subscribe to the channel, turn notifications on, and let me know down below. Did you actually enjoy this movie? But first, if you could, check us out on Instagram at Warstu to see the beautiful face behind the beautiful voice. Also, check us out on Twitter, WarstuG, because we're not verified and we're not paying for it unless someone gives me the money. Okay, that's a joke. So, there's no post-credit scene in this movie, although you may hear there's a post-credit scene, but it's actually a mid-credit scene, which sets up the future of the Black Panther franchise in a roundabout way. So, the plot leak was 100% real, except for the actual post-credit scene. So, it makes me believe that producers and directors actually lied about what was going to be the post-credit scene, because everything else in the plot leak was 100% true. So, the mid-credit scene sets up Nakia, as obviously we found out in the story, that she moved away to Haiti secretly, and Black Panther T'Challa himself already knew his son was going to be called T'Challa. So we find out right at the end, Princess Shuri, as they keep calling the princess throughout this whole movie, she gets to meet Prince T'Challa, Nakia's son, which predominantly is setting up a new bloodline with the same bloodline to become T'Challa years down the road. But seeing as the age of the kid, and this is why Nakia didn't go to the funeral scene, it makes sense. So it pretty much sets up the fact that Shuri will have to be Black Panther just like she was in the comics for many years before Prince T'Challa can take over, because he's just too young at this moment. Now, some people would say, yeah, man, it's woke that Shuri becomes Black Panther. But let's be honest, she did become Black Panther in the comics, so it is somewhat comic book accurate. I'm not a comic guy, don't come at me, guys. I'm really not a massive comic book guy, but in the comics, Shuri did become the Black Panther. So there was this campaign to recast T'Challa, so I feel like they have honored Chadwick Boseman, rest in peace. It was very sad what happened. I feel like the only way this movie actually honored him was not completely killing off T'Challa by giving his son, that he never got to meet, the name of T'Challa. So he will become King of Wakanda eventually. So that's pretty much the post-credit scene. And there was supposed to be a Doctor Doom scene that I still believe is 100% true, but with the mid-credit scene introducing T'Challa, if they introduced the post-credit scene that introduced Doctor Doom being behind everything that pretty much happened in this movie, it would have taken the focus away from Prince T'Challa, and I presume that's the reasoning why they didn't do that. So, we're going to actually go over the whole movie, what do I think, and go over the main plot points of this movie. So, predominantly, I have a lot of issues with this movie because there really isn't much of a groundbreaking story. Really isn't much of a story in this movie, to be honest, guys. There really isn't much of a story. So the funeral scene. Okay, so let me get this straight. Tony Stark, everyone, including Black Panther, went to his funeral. It comes to King T'Challa, Black Panther's funeral. Not even Bucky Barnes, the White Wolf himself, went to the funeral. I almost feel like this is disrespecting T'Challa and Black Panther within the MCU continuity, that not one single Avenger turned up at his funeral. Like, yo, if this movie's about honoring Chadwick, okay, obviously Steve Rogers can't because he's kind of been written out, but why didn't any of the Avengers that are alive turn up to his funeral? Literally made no sense. So, the storyline they gave in this movie was he essentially had some random illness, he died, he didn't tell anyone, so Shuri literally had a few moments, give or take, to replicate the herb-shaped heart to save his life. She got it up to 30%, but it wasn't a good enough. He had already been gone, and essentially that's how he died in the franchise. But as we said in the post-credits, mid-credits scene, they kind of have found a way to, in a roundabout way, bring T'Challa back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But I don't really think this was a very good storyline. They could have came up with a much different storyline. They did have a much different storyline, but obviously when Chadwick passed away. They had to change the whole movie. I kind of feel like this movie is very messy. It's very disjointed. Didn't really make a lot of sense. I do think the character development for Shuri, played by Letitia Wright, I really think Letitia Wright and Angela Bassett, who played Queen Ramona, essentially she died in this movie. Massive plot point. I do think them two were very good in this movie. Ironheart, Riri Williams, what is going on there? Like, that needs serious work because it just didn't work for me. Now, the overall villain of this movie, Namor, what have they done to him? Like, seriously. For me, he's pretty much one of the worst villains that's ever been introduced into the MCU. So they take him out by essentially taking away from water, trying to suckle the moist, all the wetness from his body, but he gets out and they end up on a desert and Shuri has a fight with him. I think she has improved fighting skills and it's a pretty cool scene, but she decimates him so easily. And then we get the Killmonger scene, obviously, before this, and it wasn't T'Challa, it was Killmonger, and he's like, are you going to be noble like T'Challa? Are you going to be freaking savage and do what needs to be done like me? And she ends up being like T'Challa and giving him mercy if he surrenders and makes all his people stop attacking. So essentially at the end, and that's pretty much it. Like, I don't really class him as a villain. I mean, sure, he nearly killed Shuri, but he just stabs like a stick through her. So it wasn't really anything to do with his mutant powers. And the producer, director, I don't know, I can't remember who said it, coming out saying he's just as strong as Thor or the Hulk. Yet Shuri absolutely freaking decimated him without much trouble. And he didn't really pose much of a threat other than drowning people to death. I mean, Namor in the comics is a freaking savage. They ruined him. I think there's so much wrong in this movie. I don't really want to be overall that negative to this movie because for me, I only put a number to a movie if I think the movie isn't that good. So for me, I would give this movie like a 5 out of 10. It didn't really add much going forward, if I'm honest. I mean, sure, we got to see more of the Wakandians. Winston, who plays M'Baku, got a massive pay rise for this movie to the point where everyone thought that he was going to become the Black Panther. So he got a big pay rise. He wasn't really in the movie that much. Now, I thought his screen time would be tenfold higher because he got a huge pay rise, but he really wasn't in this movie that much. He did joke at the end that he was going to challenge to become King of Wakanda. To be fair, I think it would be cool if he suited up. I mean, clearly there is a massive plot hole. So now that Shuri can synthesize the heart-shaped herb, they could literally have an army of Black Panthers if they wanted to. Now, that is a huge plot hole for me. Well, it should be a huge plot hole for anyone that essentially now everyone can become Black Panther if they wanted to, in theory, hypothetically speaking. But if you go into a movie looking for plot holes, then you're gonna find so many plot holes. Now, overall, it's a decent movie. Now, I don't necessarily agree with a lot of people's comments that says this movie really does Chadwick Boseman, respects him and, you know, pays major homage to him, because realistically, yeah, I think the scene right at the end with Shuri, where we see all the memories with her and her brother T'Challa, I think that's such a cute, sweet bit. And realistically, that part and the mid-credit scene with young T'Challa, Prince T'Challa, his son, I think that's the only bit in the whole movie that actually respected Chadwick and T'Challa and Black Panther to a certain degree. I mean, it doesn't really show us where the franchise is going and what's going to happen next with the Black Panther, other than, yeah, sure, it will be Shuri. But overall, I think all the reactions and all the reviews that have been put out before this, obviously, I think a lot of people are being overly nice. I mean, it's not a bad movie. It's not a great movie. It's just an average movie, if you ask me. Now, yeah, don't get me wrong. The fight scenes are very good. I think, you know, the Atomu fight with the Koyo was pretty cool. I think it looked visually nice. Wakanda looked nice. The underwater Talakone scene, I mean, it looked beautiful. It looked nice, but there was some CGI issues, to be fair. But realistically, you can't judge a movie on it just looking nice. Narrative speaking, I know they had to change the plot because of Chadwick Boseman's sad passing, but realistically, the movie was supposed to have essentially T'Challa grieving the cause of lost time due to the snap. But realistically, when they rewrote this movie, because circumstances changes sadly, I honestly think they should have went in a much different direction. And as I said in the prologue to start this video, it's going to be very diverse because a lot of people are going to come out and say it's amazing. There was so many emotional scenes that made me cry. And sure, don't get me wrong, the ending was quite sad at the end, but it was kind of obvious what was coming. You could see it a mile off. So don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on it at all. And I do understand why Marvel went in this direction. It's just for me, they didn't really give us anything. To be honest, this movie doesn't really do anything. It's like an emotional grief. To be honest, for me, it was a boring movie. You know me, I'm a freaking savage. But at the same time, yeah, the parts were good, but realistically, this was a boring movie. And Chadwick Boseman's version of Black Panther will be missed because that role was made for him. Kind of like no one else can be Iron Man other than Robert Downey Jr. Chadwick was T'Challa. But like I said, I do find it very odd, really odd, how none of the Avengers turned up to T'Challa's funeral, yet they all turned up to Tony Stark's funeral. What is the difference? Don't get me wrong. I think you should go watch this movie, sure, but I only give movies a number if I'm not overly a fan of them. So overall, I'd give this somewhere like maybe a 5 out of 10, maybe a 6. Somewhere around there. I mean, I think it does have its merit. I think Ironheart, Riri Williams, and all the Vibranium stuff, yeah, sure, cool, but there really needs to be some work done with the Riri character because that's essentially the replacement for Iron Man until we get to Secret Wars. So, yeah, I mean, the early reactions to this movie were like, yeah, it's the best movie in Phase 4. That's not really saying a lot. To be honest, it's a little bit better than actually, I'm not going to say that. I do think the original Black Panther movie is far better, realistically. There's parts of this movie that have a little bit more in it, but that's because obviously Okoye and a few of the Delage Margie were in the other Avengers movie, so maybe you got a bit more of an emotional attachment to it. It all depends how much of an emotional attachment you have to the characters within this movie to how much you like it, but yeah, it was pretty boring, to be honest. But you know that. It was advertised as a grief sorrow movie based on all the early reactions, and I'm not going to be so savage, but it realistically wasn't it was an average movie, to be honest. It's got an 85 from the critics, which I mean, it did start at 95, so it has dropped massively. Don't get me wrong, Angela Bassett, I think she does deserve some kind of Oscar. I think she is a great actor. I just go too far to say Letitia Wright really killed this role as well. So like I say, there are really cool parts of this movie, but overall, it didn't really do anything for a lot of people. But I almost feel like people will be too nice with their reviews for this movie and they will be so super nice. But I've not really said anything bad, but realistically for me, guys, this movie, it just wasn't very good for me. So like always, guys, let me know everything that you think down below. Like always, please like, subscribe, and comment to the channel. It really helps the channel grow. I've been somewhat positive of this movie, as much as I could be, without being untransparent. I've been as real and transparent about this movie as I have been. I feel like a lot of people aren't being real with their actual reviews for this movie, but I've been real. So like always, guys, like always, make sure to subscribe, comment, and all that good stuff. Check us out on Instagram at Warstu, and I will catch you in another video, guys, very soon. Catch you later.